Okay, then let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, my name is Stuart, and today we will be talking about how to use Flexi in collaboration with other applications. Aaron Clapp will be our presenter, Aaron is in charge of all training here at SAI, and he knows everything there is to know about Flexi. And so he'll go ahead and give you our presentation, and then we will open it up for some questions. So if you have anything you want to follow up on something he's mentioned, or if you just have any other questions about Flexi, want to see how something works, go ahead and type those in the chat window, and we'll answer as many of those as we can. And then we will be posting the recording to YouTube as usual. So it'll be on the SAI YouTube channel, and we will send everyone a link to that recording so that you can view it whenever you like or share it with anyone else. And I think that's everything for right now. So we'll go ahead and have Aaron take it away.
All right. So working with Flexi and other applications. So we've designed Flexi to make sure that it is as flexible as possible. And so when we always say we can work with other applications, that means we can use Flexi, the production manager, with other applications that we design and also other applications that we don't necessarily have any part in. So the first one that we want to kind of just get our feet warmed up with here is the send to EndRoute feature. So if you use EndRoute and you have Flexi, you can easily send your vector design right over to EndRoute without any problems. So I've got Flexi open here. I also have EndRoute open with a blank new document. Minimize EndRoute, and we'll just type in some text here. Let's go some 4-inch letters here. All I have to do then is I don't even have to convert this. I can simply go to my file menu and we can hit send to EndRoute. And then if we pull up EndRoute, just like that, we now have we've now got this vector artwork right in EndRoute, and I can start designing or applying my toolpathing in here. So this is kind of the idea of what we mean is when we collaborate with other programs is we're able to import or send files to another application. Now this is kind of a real simple example of how we can send, you know, a very simple vector artwork over to EndRoute, but we can get a little more complicated with this by sending files to other RIP softwares. So that will be our next task for the day. So you'll see up here, and I have them all activated on my account, but you might see by default a couple different icons up here on the desktop. You'll see a Send to VersaWorks maybe, or you might even see a Send to VersaWorks Dual, or maybe a Send to Onyx, or a Send to Rasterlink. Typically, if you have a subscription, these can be added for free at no cost. You just add those in, and then they will show up. So we add them to your license. You'll update your license via the license manager, and then these buttons will show up inside of your Flexi the next time you open it. And with these particular tools, this allows you to send the job to another RIP software. Now, we understand that sometimes people are more comfortable with other RIP softwares, but they enjoy our designing portion. So if you buy a Flexi subscription, that's just a designer copy, and you use another RIP software, you can still use Flexi and send directly to that application. And what this does essentially is it drops a PDF or an EPS file right into the hot folder of that specific application, which therefore in turn will import it directly into the queue. So let's take a look at some things here. So we'll take our text that we have on screen here. It doesn't have to be really anything specific. We'll hit the Send to VersaWorks button. So Send to VersaWorks, this is for all of you Roland users. We get this little dialog box right here. So what we do here is we simply give it a file name. We can choose whether we want this to be a selection only. So if you have other things in your design, but the only things you have selected are the ones you want to send, you can have it include a contour cut. So if you're sending a print and cut job to your Roland VersaWorks, we can include that. And then by default, it sends it to a PDF file. But if we want to, we can send it as an EPS, depending on what we're doing. Now, in this particular case, I don't have any of these applications installed. I don't have licenses for VersaWorks or for Rasterlink or anything. But what we would do is this default folder path typically in 90% of the situations will work. If you've installed Roland VersaWorks in the default folder that it likes to install, this will already be ready to go for you and already set. Now, the only time that this may change is if, for example, maybe you don't save your programs. Maybe your PC has like a very small SSD that you use for the C drive, and you store all of your programs on like an F drive or something like that, or a D drive or some other external application or hard drive. Then you would just need to hit browse and navigate to that hard drive on your local disk. So you would go and find this exact same folder on that disk, and it should recognize it. Basically, Flexi knows if you give it the general folder path, it knows which folders to dial into in order to get to QA and QB for your different printers. So once you have the correct folder set, what you should see is instead of saying first printer, it will say something like, Roland VP540 or whatever your Roland device is, it would pop up in here. And if you have multiple devices, then those would show up here, and you would select the device or select the printer cutter that you're trying to send to. And then obviously you just choose QA and QB, whichever you want it to go to, hit send, and essentially all it does is it exports the file as a PDF or EPS, depending on what you chose, and loads it into a hot folder, which then your VersaWorks software or your Rasterlink or whatever you're using, your Onyx, when you save into a hot folder will automatically pull that job right into that queue. And so it makes it really easy for you to be able to send to another RIP software and process these jobs and still be able to design in Flexi. So we can also take a look here at, say, Rasterlink. Again, the window is going to look very, very similar to our VersaWorks one. Again, we've got our folder path, and also our Onyx one is going to look very similar. So they all look very similar. There's a few differences between the applications, and so there's a few things that are a little bit different. But for the most part, the idea is pretty much the same. So this is how you would send a job to another RIP software. The other thing that we can do is we can send contour cuts in multiple different ways. Now this is, I'm going to admit, this is going to get a little bit tricky, but I know that this is a scenario that has come up in the past for us, and that's why we have a very specific way of dealing with this. So let's say that, for example, you love to design in Flexi. You use Onyx for your printing, and then you come back into Flexi, and then you want to do your contour cutting. Well, Flexi can do that as well. So what you can do is we can take our text. I can go to my effects menu and set up a contour cut. We're going to just use the default contour cut. In this case, we're going to use one of our main contour cut colors. And it's going to be important that you use those colors because of the way this works. I'm going to hit apply. So now I've got a nice little contour cut around my letters. And now when I go into effects, I'm going to set up a contour cut mark. Now, if you were using our RIP software, you wouldn't need to do this, because when you click on Rip and Print will automatically see what kind of device you have set in Production Manager, and it'll automatically apply those marks for you, so you don't have to do this. But because we're going to go to a different RIP software, we need to apply the contour cut marks ahead of time inside the design before we send a print. So I'm going to go to Effects, Contour Cut Mark, and then I'm going to choose in Design Central what device I have. So whether it's an HP, a Suma, a Roland, a Graphtec, Mamaki, whatever device I have, I'm going to choose in here. So let's just say we choose the Graphtec 4 points Type 2. All right, we put those in there and we hit apply. This file is now ready to save as a PDF. So what I would do is I would export this, or if you have a Send to VersaWorks option or Send to Onyx, you'd click the Send to Onyx and you would send this file over to Onyx to print. So fast forward a little bit, it's already printed, it's off the printer, you've cut it off, you're ready to put it in the cutter, you set it on your Graphtec, now you come back into Flexi. It's important to have or to save this original file. The PDF won't work when you come back into Flexi, so just make sure that when you pull or when you're ready to cut, you have this view open with this file. So what I would recommend is just save the file real quick. Then you'll notice this extra little icon that you probably don't use very often. It's this Cut Contour button right here. I'm going to click on this, and you're going to get a screen that looks very similar to the Rip and Print and the Cut Plot screens. And this allows me to set all of my cutter settings. Then all I have to do is hit send. This will send my cut job to the cutter. It will read the registration marks, and it'll do everything like a normal job. So a little bit of a complicated process there. There's a few steps to kind of know, but this allows you to design in Flexi, send to another RIP, bring the job back into Flexi, and then send the contour cut via our Production Manager. So if that's a scenario that you're in, we can collaborate with those programs in a kind of a neat way in that regard. All right, so that covers that particular instance. How about our Production Manager? What can we do in our Production Manager to collaborate with other files or other programs? Well, I'm going to go ahead and clear the contour cut mark here, and let's say I'm going to go into export, and I'm going to export this as a PDF. And that should be fine. I'm going to uncheck the suppress options here just so I can see, include cut contour paths. Great. Okay. So let's say that we designed a file in Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop or CorelDRAW, and we want to import that file and print it. Well, some people prefer to use other applications in order to do their design, and that's okay. We don't mind. And they prefer our RIP software, so we can cater to that. You don't necessarily need to have Flexi open, so the design portion open, in order for you to do a contour cut directly to our software. So if you have a file that's already set up with a contour cut and it's ready to go, there's no point in bringing it into Flexi and then sending it. I mean, that's a okay workflow, but that's one extra step. If you know that the job is ready to go, no changes are necessary, it already has the contour cut on it, then all we have to do is go directly to Production Manager. And what I'm going to do is I'll load it into this test Muto that I set up here. I'm going to go to Add Job. I'm going to make sure my Muto is still selected down here. And a contour cut PDF, add, and now here's where it's going to be important. So I'm going to double click on the job, and I'm going to go to my second tab, the workflow tab. And now you can see that I can choose what I want it to do. I can say print and contour, and then I can decide what device I want this to go to. So obviously we print, we're going to do the Graphtec, so I'm going to leave that at the FC9000. and I'm going to cut it just like this. So how does Flexi do this, and how does it recognize that whole contour cut thing, and how does it know what's a contour cut and what's not? Well, that's a good question. So remember when I talked about when we're in Flexi here and we were applying a contour cut? We'll just go back there and review. We said we had to use one of these colors, these ones that are labeled cut contour. So it is basically an industry standard that if you have a spot color, and a spot color in Flexi is identified by these little dots on the color. So if you see a color with a little dot on it, that means it's a spot color. So it can be any color you want it to be. It could be pink, blue, green, yellow, cyan, whatever you want that color to be, as long as it's a spot color and it has these properties to it. So you notice how it's labeled cut with a capital C and then contour with a capital C and no space. As long as you use that formatting, so a spot color, cut contour with a capital C on both words, that is an industry standard, and all applications will understand how that works. So for example, if I create this file and I export it as a PDF and I open it in Illustrator, Illustrator will know that that's a contour cut. If I send this to Onyx, Onyx will understand that that is a contour cut. Same for Roland VersaWorks. Roland VersaWorks will understand that that is a contour cut. If I use a color that's not this, say I just pick a random green, then the software that I'm sending it to, like my RIP or whatever, it's not going to understand that that's a contour cut, and it'll actually just print that green line. So you don't want that. So that's how EndRoute, or sorry, Production Manager can understand. So that means that you can design in Corel, Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, any application you choose, as long as you select, create a spot color, label it cut contour, and when you apply that color to any shape or any outline, then it will automatically be read as a cut contour when it comes into our Production Manager. So it makes it really easy to import and bring these in from another application. So that's how we can use our Production Manager to interact. Now, one just quick note about this. It does work a little bit differently from your traditional print and cut. So when I go into here and I choose I want to send my print and contour cut, the contour cut job doesn't actually get generated until the print job is complete. So when I hit send, you'll see this processing in your printer, and then once it finishes the processing in the printer, you will see a job pop up in your cutter. So you might not see it right away. Don't be alarmed. Don't worry. It's coming. When it finishes, that's when it generates that cut job. So just be aware of that. Then another thing. So we're going to switch back to our designer again. Now we talked about printing and cutting and sending jobs to other applications. How about our software and Adobe Photoshop plugins? Well, this is a common thing for Flexi. It's probably one of the things we do the most. We get a lot of requests from people is, how do you get Adobe plugins into our software so that I can edit bitmaps? Well, it's a really good question. So let's go into import. I'm going to navigate to my local PC here, and we'll find the samples folder inside of our SAI. So we've got a folder we can modify here. Go to samples, and we'll just pull in this. All right, so we've got a bitmap here. And the way we can tell that is because in Design Central, it gives us this little, these two icons here. And we're going to apply some Adobe filters to this. Well, you know that bitmaps, you can come in here and you can choose some very basic filters. We do have some that you can use by default in Flexi. These are in every copy of your Flexi software that we've had forever. You can also change color modes and things like that. But you can also add Adobe filters. Now, I'm going to show you how to add these filters. So good thing is that you can always rewatch this later. So if you miss a step or something, watch it back on YouTube and you'll be able to get the process down. But the first thing that we're going to need to do when installing Adobe Photoshop filters is change the folder path. So I'm going to go to Edit, and I'm going to select Preferences. Now, by default, I'm going to hit my File Paths. Now, by default, the Adobe plugins, this folder path right here is actually going to be pointed to the Adobe Photoshop folder. So normally that's okay, unless you're using Creative Cloud. I think the Creative Cloud has 64-bit plugins. Currently, you have to use the 32-bit plugins. So that might not even work. But so just be aware of that. Anytime you're downloading plugins, they should be 32-bit. So just be aware of that. But here's the thing. If we, by default, it's set to the Adobe Photoshop folder, which is fine, because then you can get access to the Adobe Photoshop filters. But let's say that you want to install other third-party Adobe filters. Well, then you'd have to install those into the Adobe folder and things like that. I'm going to avoid that, and I'm just going to use the Flexi folder. There's a folder in Flexi that we need to set it to make sure that we can have all kinds of different manufacturers installed. So I'm going to hit Browse, and this is a basic thing we do here. So we're going to go to the local C drive. You'll navigate to your program files, and then you're going to go to the SAI folder. And then you're going to go to the Adobe Plugins folder. So in this case, I have multiple installs of Flexi. You guys will probably only have one, but you'll choose the one that you're currently using. So in this case, it's this folder here, the build 3286. And then I choose my Adobe Plugins and hit OK. That's how I'm going to choose it. So now that I know where to go, when I install my third-party applications, I'm going to want to install them in that folder. So that's the first step. We go into our preferences, we set the Adobe Plugins folder to the Adobe Plugins folder inside of the SAI software folder. All right, once we're done with that, now at this point, you can go to the internet and you can download all kinds of different filters and install them into our software. And I'm just going to show you what that looks like from my perspective here. So if I navigate to that particular folder and Adobe Plugins, you can see now that there's several things in here. So we've got some EXE, we've got Filter Forge 9. So we've got several things going on in here. And this is where we're going to install these. So when you download them, you want to choose this Adobe Plugins folder, and that's where you're going to install those applications. So they'll just pile up inside this folder, and that's okay. That's what we want. We want them to be all in the same location so that when we go and add different packs, we can all grab them from the same place. So that's what that looks like from here. So what does that look like then from the software side? If we go to our bitmap menu, click on Adobe Filters, now we've got several options in here. So here's two that I downloaded that worked with mine, Filter Forge 9 and this Optic Verge Labs. Those were two ones that I downloaded, installed right into the software. The Filter Forge I won't be able to show you right now because it's on a trial and my trial ran out, but this one works here. So in this case, I can click on Optic Verve, and then I'm going to click on Virtual Photographer. And basically what it does is it takes the image that I have selected inside of Flexi and it loads it into the EXE file of that particular filter plugin. So I can come in here and make some changes. You know, I can make some blurring amounts, and I'm going to play with this. Now, every filter plugin application is going to look a little bit different. And so you'll see that there's going to be some differences between each one. Some are more rich. Some of them you have to pay for. So for example, one of the really common ones that people really like to use is the alien skin and eye candy. Those are probably the two most popular that we deal with in terms of Photoshop plugins. So just be aware of that. They do have 64 and 32-bit versions of those filters. So when you download them, just make sure and download the 32-bit versions. And you can install them right into the software. Now, those are ones that's a perfect example of a paid option. This particular one is free. And so this one here I can use and it's not a problem. There are others where you pay $10, $40, $50, depends on how much, how much complexity there is and things like that. So like I said, there's a whole world of Adobe plugins that you can put into our software depending on what you want to do. So once I've decided that, yeah, I kind of like this, I don't, whatever, I hit process, and just like that, that has now applied that filter to the image right inside of Flexi, and then it shuts down the filter application. So this is a really great way to add really unique and interesting plugins and features into the Flexi software if you want to use Flexi to do some more Photoshop-ish type effects. So like embossing letters, creating bevel effects, creating all kinds of filters and kind of like Instagram filters or different things like that. This is a really great and easy way to do that. And honestly, it's not too difficult. It just takes a few minutes. You download those filters, install them into that folder, restart Flexi, and boom, just like that, they pop right up, and we can apply these effects to any image or into any bitmap inside of Flexi. So it really makes it flexible. So I would highly recommend experimenting with some of that. I don't have like an official list of supported ones. I will tell you this, that the ones that I had the ones that we as tech support agents have the most luck with are going to be the alien skin, eye candy, filter forge, and this optic verve. This one was a new one that I just tried recently because I wanted to see if I could find some others. And so this one worked really well. There are other ones that are kind of a little more quirky. So just kind of be aware of that. It all kind of depends on, what the person who created the filter, what their implementation is like, and kind of how they built the programming and things like that. So in fact, I had one that I ran into the other day that it would pop up a message every time you open Flexi. So you'll probably find some duds out there that don't work that great, and that's mainly just because of the way they were programmed on their end. But you'll find some other ones like this filter forge. I've found that it's actually really good and really powerful. Same with the alien skin and eye candy. You'll pay a good amount for those, but they're really highly polished and they're very, very well done. So be aware of that. I think this will really kind of give you an extra flair inside of Flexi. And if it helps you not to have to open up Photoshop and do something in there and then import it back into Flexi, hey, that's a step saved. So we think that this, I think we could probably spend all day going over different things, that how we use different applications, how we can collaborate between different applications. But for just because of time, I kind of picked the ones of the highlights of the ones that you guys would probably most be interested in. So at this point, do you guys have any questions about this, or just any questions about Flexi in general? And let's go with that.
From Brooke, I just wanted to know more about spot colors. Just what is a spot color, and how do you know if a color is considered one?
Okay, that's a good question. So in Flexi, it's really easy. So let's just take this image. We'll move it out of the way. I'm just going to draw a shape on screen here. And I can literally take any color I want in Flexi. And this is kind of what's really nice about Flexi is I can take any color that I want and turn it into a spot color. So for example, we've got a bunch of, and I'm not going to pick a wild color here because that usually hurts my eyes. We'll pick a blue here. So I can take this blue, and if we look at our color mixer, you'll notice that it's an RGB color. Well, if I want to turn this into a spot color, all I have to do is click on that, select spot, and just like that, it's been converted to a spot color. And now if I want to, I could save this color to my swatch table and edit it. So let's just say we change the tint a little bit. I can left click on this little color mixer box here, and I can drag this to my chart down below. So I just dragged it to my my color chart down here, and I can now right click on this color chart and say color specs, and I can go in here and grab this color, and I can rename it. I can call it anything I want it to be. So this color right here, I could call this cut, contour, and let's just say, I think 1 through 4 is already used. So let's just say cut contour 6. Just like that. And if I select this image or this file, go to contour cut, I could now use, wherever it went to, cut contour 6, and Flexi will recognize that as a contour cut, even if we send it into Production Manager. In Illustrator and Photoshop, I'm not as familiar with how they set up a spot color. I don't know that there's like a visual indication. I forget, but I do believe that if you go into the properties of a color inside of Illustrator and Photoshop, you can define what kind of color it is. Whether it's a CMYK, RGB, spot color, it's got the different ranges. And then you should be able to also rename that color in there as well. So as long as you do those two things. And the other thing about Illustrator and Photoshop is I believe that you have to assign the, if you want something to be a contour cut color, you set it as a stroke. And then I think the stroke width has to be of a certain width. So it's like really small. So I want to say it's like 0.05 thickness on the stroke width, or something like that. Don't quote me on that. You probably want to look up in Photoshop settings which is the best way to create a contour cut line. But from what I understand, it's supposed to be a stroke with a very, very thin stroke assigned to it. So if you go too thick, the software wants to tend to interpret it as just a color versus a contour cut. But let's see.
I have another one regarding the Photoshop plugins. Under my SAIC drive, I have 3 folders. Where do I go from there to find plugins?
Okay, so it looks like you've got SAI Production 19, 19.1, and SAI Production Suite Cloud. Okay, so your SAI Production Suite Cloud, that is probably an older version, like version 11, or maybe version 12. I'm pretty sure it's probably 11 though. So it's not going to be that one. So it's either going to be the 19 or the 19.1. Most likely, it'll probably be the 19.1. And the reason why I say that is because when you install a version of Flexi, and then let's say if you go in and install like a major update, then it will, tech support will typically recommend that you not overwrite your previous version. And there's good reasons for that. Mainly so that if anything goes wrong with the new install, you can always go and copy the settings from your old version. So that's why we prefer that. So that if anything goes wrong and the new version is not printing the same, you can always reference back to the old install and say, oh, okay, I forgot to choose this, or I forgot to click on this little box, or whatever. You can kind of compare settings. So most likely for you, it's going to be SAI Production Suite 191. But here's a way that you can confirm that. And I apologize to everybody who has to see this, but I'm going to show you my desktop, and please don't judge. It's a mess. But you can go to your icon on the desktop. You can right-click and go to Properties. And if you pull up Properties, right here in the middle, it'll tell you where the target folder is. So it's actually going to tell you where that particular icon is pointing to. So if you typically always double-click on the icon on the desktop to open up your Flexi, this icon, you can see what the folder path is right there, and so you can tell which one you're using. So let's cover that up. We don't need to see that anymore.
George wanted to know, how do you search for a specific Pantone color?
How do we search for a specific Pantone color? Well, that's actually a really good question. So the way that we do that is we first have to have a so we have to have a specific Pantone chart open. So I'm going to right-click on my existing Pantone or my existing color chart. I'm going to say Open Table. It'll probably give you this view right here where it says Library and Table. Go to Library, and then go to the Pantone folder. There we go. And you want to choose the Pantone color swatch that you're looking for. So obviously there's stuff like metallic coated and stuff like that. Typically the ones that you're going to be looking for the most are going to be the Pantone solid coated, Pantone solid uncoated, and then you probably want to have the V3 open. So the solid uncoated V3 and the solid coated V3. So let's just say solid coated. This is the biggest chart, the solid coated. So if I open that up, there's two things that I can do. I can grab this color bar down here, and I can just drag it up like this. And if I expand it, and I just hit the name, this will sort it by name now. So now this is all being sorted by name. And we can make this a little bit bigger. So now I can scroll through here and look at it via name. So that's probably the easiest way to find a specific Pantone color. Open up the chart in the family that it's going to be located in, and then grab the swatch table, pull it up here, and sort it by name, and this will get it all in chronological order, so 1 through whatever those numbers are.
Okay. Okay, Joe said, is it possible to select a bitmap in Flexi and open it to Photoshop and then save the changes back to Flexi?
Unfortunately, not back and forth like that, no. I would imagine that if Photoshop has a hot folder where it would automatically open up files that are in that folder, you could save or export as a Photoshop file right to that hot folder, but I don't know if it does or not. In that particular case, they don't have a, I'm assuming that's probably why we don't have a button for it, is because they probably don't have a hot folder for it, which makes more sense. Typically, the types of programs that have hot folders are going to be the types of programs that have like a queue, like RIP softwares and things like that, where when it loads it in, it doesn't open the file, it just loads it into a queue, and you can see it in a list. So I think that's probably why. So the easiest thing in that case, unfortunately, would be keep it in the Photoshop format, I guess. And then you can just go back and forth that way. But you can easily import all of your Adobe Photoshop filters and put them into that folder that we were talking about, and they would be able to pull right in there. So if you were just doing small changes with some filters, you could just put them in that folder and then just have those filters right inside of Flexi, if it was just a filter thing you were doing.
Okay. Okay, we have another one that says, how can you put an outline onto an object with a contour cut without the outline having a contour cut?
Let's see. So that's an interesting question. Okay, so let's take this shape here and let's apply an outline. So one of the things about outlines that you do want to be aware of is that, oops, I think I hit, no, here we go, outline. Let's make this thick, and let's not use that color. We're going to use cyan. And one of the options right here is the with or without backing. So if you use the with backing and apply it, and I separate the outline from the backing, so you'll notice that the outline has a backing to it. So typically, anytime you're doing a contour cut with an object that has an outline on it, you typically want to use the with backing option, because what will happen is that if you don't, you get this effect. So we'll just reapply that outline. Outline with no backing. And if I go separate and I pull this away, now it's not filled. So anytime you apply a contour cut to this object, it's going to want to try and put a contour. Well, I'll show you what happens. If I go to Effects, Contour Cut, and then well, in this particular case, it's not going to make too big of a difference because my offset is rich. But if I set this offset to 0, or if I go negative on this, at some point you might get some, and in this case it doesn't look like it's doing it, but you might get some artifacting here where the contour cut actually starts looping around on itself, or the contour cut, it may actually cut on both sides of this line. So when you're doing outlines, I would highly recommend using the with backing option, and that is the when you go into effects and outline, the with backing is the one that has the red filled in the middle. That's with backing. So that's to help solve that problem, I would use with backing.
Couple follow-ups. Just about people asked, is there a way to type the color you're looking for?
Unfortunately, there is not directly, no. If we right click and go to color specs, we do have a way to find. So we can look through a library of colors this way, or we can use our find. Now, unfortunately, this is not like a direct find type thing. So I can't just search in Pantone such and such and then do a search. What this does is it allows me to select a color, and then I can choose. So if we go down to Pantone here, I can choose the Pantone folder and then choose a delta. And when I hit search, it will search all the Pantone colors that are within E less than 10 delta away from this particular color. So unfortunately, no, there's not a direct correlation to that. So we can't search, and that's something we could probably look into. I don't know if it's a limitation of us to be able to search it. I don't know, but at the moment, no, there's not a way. But that's definitely something we can look into for sure. But
Okay.
this is the only find option that way.
Okay. We have another question from Kelly. It says, can perspective, like the distort feature, be used on bitmaps, or is it for vector images only?
Let's see. I believe Let's see here. I believe this should work with vectors only. Yes, so that's correct. It's vectors only. The distort options are for vector artwork typically, so not with any of the bitmaps.
Okay. So kind of follow up. Let's see. George said, "What do I do if I encounter a soft mask? Look through all the help files and nothing can be found about a soft mask."
When you're talking about a soft mask, is that like a transparent type thing, or like a mask that has a little bit of a transparency to it? Because if that's what you're looking for, then you would just apply those two effects separately. So you draw your object that you want to mask, create like a blending mode or a transparency, and then use that shape to mask whatever object that you have in the background.
Said it's called a soft mask in the object panel.
Let's see here. In the object panel. Is the object panel, maybe it's a terminology thing?
He says there's no way to make one, but I have several files that have them.
I'm not familiar with a specific way to make a soft mask. The only mask that I'm aware of here in our software is a arrange mask, so just a normal mask. That's the only one that I know of so far. If a file has it, we probably recognize it. So Flexi can read and interpret a lot of different effects that it may or may not be able to apply. So it's possible that if that was applied in another application, Flexi probably can read it, but it can't create it, or it doesn't have that particular option. If you got the file from another customer or from somewhere else, or it came from another app. I'll have to check into that though. I've not heard of soft masks, but again, I'm not I'm not as proficient with Photoshop and Illustrator as probably most people would be. So I can look into that and check it out though.
Yeah, interesting.
And see if there's a way if there's a workaround, or if there's another way to apply that kind of mask.
Okay, yeah, we can look at that. So I think we're almost out of time, but we do have one more question. It says, what if the object has the cut contour before you add the outline? When I add the outline always has a contour cut as well. So kind of going back to that.
Okay. If you're going to do something with an outline, let's see. So let's just draw again. So if we're going to put a contour cut on it first, typically, let's see here. And let's go negative on that. That is fine. And then we do an outline. I mean, that in terms of how you'd apply it, I guess it shouldn't be a problem. For example, here, it seems like it's applied it just fine, and I have an outline applied. What you could do, or what might be preferred, I guess, if you're having issues with that particular workflow, maybe you can create the outline first. So let's do this. Let's clear the outline, clear the contour cut. You can always separate. So when I create an object like an outline, it automatically just groups it to that object, because it assumes that you want those pieces to stay together. So it groups them together. So then I can right click on this object and separate it. And that really doesn't do anything to my design per se. All it does is it makes it so that the outline is now separate from the main object so that I can move it around. So then if I needed to, I could then just go back and select my original square and add a contour to that, a contour cut to that object specifically. So if you're having trouble with that workflow where you're adding a contour cut to an object and then adding an outline, I might try doing it this way. Add the outline first, separate the outline from the object, and then apply that contour cut last. Because typically a contour cut is something that you do kind of as your last step before you go out to print. So that may be why you could be having some issues there. If you continue to have issues more in that regard, what we may want to do is give our tech support a call, and we can log in and we can kind of maybe see step by step what you're doing. And then there's a good possibility that we just, maybe I'm just not thinking about it correctly. And if I saw it on screen, I'd be like, oh yeah, okay, I see what you're doing. So that might just be a kind of an aha moment there. So if it continues to happen and that still is an issue, I would give tech support a call and see if they can help with that if there's an issue there.
Okay. Well, I think that's about all the time we have for today, but we will be having our next webinar for Flexi. Let's see here. It'll be on September 10th, and we'll be talking about the features and functions of banner finishing tools. And yes, Brooke, you will receive an email with the link to the video. We will be uploading it to the YouTube channel, and we'll send everyone a link to the recording. And thank you so much, Aaron, for covering all that information. And thank you, everyone, for attending. We appreciate it, and we'll see you folks next month.